Acquire absolute pitch using a learning box. The learning box is used to memorize words in a foreign language, where native words are written on one side of the card, and on the other side, their translations are written. The student translates the foreign word on one side and then checks for the correct answer on the back. Any cards that he or she correctly answers are moved to the last position in the next bin. If the student makes an error, the card stays in the first bin, but is placed at the end of the stack. The task is to move all cards to the last bin. Because incorrectly remembered words are returned to the first bin, you repeat words more often if you fail to remember them correctly, since the incorrect answers must work through all bins again. Make sense? Instead of words, the listening ear trainer uses musical notes. First, you select up to 18 out of 48 notes. Start with a few notes that you can sing comfortably. For this demo, we will use C4, D4, E4, and F4. I will also select the training mode, so you can see the pitch progression. When you have finished selecting your notes and options, click Go to start the exercise. When the exercise starts, the following screen is presented. Depending on the lesson you started, you will hit the bullseye when you match the pitch within the displayed deviation. For this demo, we have selected an accuracy deviation of 50 cents. Here are our selected notes. The first note is also shown on the staff. After a moment, I will start counting 3, 4. Then sing the note. To remember the sounds more easily, we recommend using solfege syllables. That is, do, re, mi, fa. Since for absolute pitch it is important to have the sound correct in your mind, we recommend that you start singing your note during the count-off. This allows you to adjust your voice, in case the tension and resulting pitch is not what you expected. Essentially, you will put your vocal cords in a position to match the sound you remember. In this way, when the actual evaluation starts, you are not hindered by mechanics of executing the pitch, and your inner ear is tested more accurately. The first pitch evaluated also sets the direction of the arrow, showing whether the note sung is below or above the written pitch. So, if you start too high, the arrow points down. If you start too low, the arrow points up. And if your sung pitch lies within the lesson's tolerance, the arrow will be straight. This initial expression of your inner ear is so important that this direction of the arrow will be kept until the target is reached. As long as you stay within the selected deviation in cents, the arrow will go straight towards the target. If you miss that goal, the arrow will move away from the center line. You won't be able to bring the arrow back to the center line by changing your pitch going up or down, because the arrow line shows the cumulated error. To see the deviation from the target pitch, you have to refer to the pitch line on the staff. Keep in mind that the real-time pitch line is only shown in training mode. Now it is your turn. Sing the note C4. Do not worry if you cannot hit the note. In the exercises of this method, you will be able to choose notes that better fit your voice. Okay, let's go. Did you notice that after an incorrectly sung pitch, the correct pitch was played twice? If you successfully match a pitch, or if you stay within the deviation, an arpeggiated major triad is played along with the tested note as the root. In the first lesson, the program will accept a very large tolerance, allowing you to be more than a whole tone off. With this larger tolerance, A note sung a whole step or even farther away from the targeted pitch will be evaluated as correct. This will show you, in broad terms, how to sing using your oral memory. By relaxing and remembering approximately how you placed your vocal cords, that is, when you were correct, you will repeat the same sound and get a hit or near hit for the note you sing. The larger tolerance allowed will accept it as a match, even if it's more than a whole tone off. Notes accepted as correctly matched will travel to the right. The goal is to get all the notes you selected to the rightmost bin. Confused? You might ask why a note is evaluated as correct when it was sung a whole note off? Simply, to show you that you can match, or in this case nearly match, a note from your oral memory. If you succeeded in remembering the notes in this wide tolerance, you can move on to a narrower tolerance. Lesson 2 still accepts notes sang more than a whole tone away. However, in each lesson you must remember more precisely than the previous lesson. During this process, you will discover that for some notes, you have fewer problems than for others matching the pitch. The learning box helps you to improve these uncertain notes. At the same time, your brain will develop new techniques and tricks for remembering a note better. Your ability to imagine a sound will improve. When you have reached the goal of your near hits at a narrower tolerance range, go to the next level, which will have an even narrower band of tolerance. To acquire absolute pitch, you must do exercises for smaller tolerances. Since you may sing pitches in between the semitones, this will force you to better memorize the note and get hits with smaller tolerances. If you can hit all the notes with the precision of 7 cents, then you are a professional singer and have perfect pitch. To get such good results also involves voice training. However, a precision of 33 cents is perfectly acceptable and attainable without special voice training. If you reach this goal, you can also argue that you have absolute pitch. You even know to which precision you can hit the notes. Next, we'll do another activity. Most likely, you do not have a voice range of 4 octaves. Therefore, we have created another exercise, in which you have only to identify the sounded note. No singing is required. However, the Octave Anchor Pitches Method is far less effective for learning than the singing funnel method. With the singing funnel method, you must conceptualize the note with your inner ear, and thus you will build tonal memory. The exercise, Recognize the Note, has also a training mode. As a beginner, you should really use this mode extensively. In customary tests, you are presented a note randomly within the range of C2 to C6. If you have had little formal training in recognizing notes, you would likely fail at these recognition tests. Therefore, in our method we exclude single notes, giving you ease of recognition at first, and building skills by adding notes gradually. For example, starting with C-sharp 4. Or, even better, excluding whole octaves at the start. In our first test, we will include only a few notes, an octave apart. That is, we select C2, C3, C4, C5, and C6. With these settings, the following exercise will present you with these 5 notes only. You should very soon recognize all 5 notes with ease, since they are fairly far apart. Okay, let's look at how the exercise works. A lesson presents you with 25 exercises. If you restart a lesson, you will continue scoring from where you left. Each note contains a counter in the corner. This counter tells you how many times you have hit the note correctly. Similar to the learning box, the counter resets to 0 if you make an error. If you have identified a note correctly 7 times in a row, the count will not increase further. Thus, if you reach a total of 35 points for all 5 notes in this test, you have reached the maximum number of points possible. Now it is your turn. Click on the note you hear. Remember that if tomorrow you repeat the exercise, you may likely miss the first note. But after that you will begin to recognize these 5 notes more easily, even after a substantial break. This is because your brain quickly switches to identifying notes using its sense of relative pitch, thus giving the correct answer based on relating the sounded note to a previously sounded note. Let me demonstrate relative pitch with a well-known song. Do you recognize the following melody? I will assume that to most Western ears, the melody is recognizable as Silent Night from Franz Xaver Gruber. Listen again to the same melody. Is something different here? Would you say the melody is still Silent Night? If you did, then you are correct. The only difference is that the second sample starts on G4 instead from C4. In both cases you easily could recognize and label the melody as Silent Night, because the notes following the starting pitch have the same relative distance to that pitch, and respectively to the previous note. The red numbers, showing the changes, all correspond to each other. No complex math was needed to recognize the melody, which proves that the brain works well in identifying melodies through relative pitch. The absolute pitches of the notes do not pertain to the recognition process of a melody. Where is the crux? The main problem is that when you start an exercise and have correctly matched the first tones, most likely you will detect the next notes using relative pitch skills, and thereby improve your relative pitch skills, which is good, because, as we have pointed out elsewhere, relative pitch is more important than absolute pitch. For example, if an out-of-tune piano is accompanying or giving the pitches, you should tune your instrument to that tuning. Otherwise, the combined sounds will not be in harmony. This preference of harmony is probably also the reason why in the Western world absolute pitch is rare. Our intelligent brain did not find a good reason to learn absolute pitch, unless, as a child, you were exposed to pitch exercises or musical training in some form. There is nothing to reward you, in childhood, for having absolute pitch. Absolute pitch is nothing more than a relation between a frequency and a name. As, for example, the frequency 440 Hz is called concert pitch A4. In contrast, using relative pitch we notice harmonic and melodic relationships. Your brain likes to generalize concepts and apply these concepts afterwards. For example, a child goes through a stage in which he or she generalizes grammatical rules, saying, for example, my brother going to school, instead of, my brother went to school. The brain must learn exceptions in a separate effort. Relative pitch is a general concept that is prevalent throughout the world. The starting frequency, in fact the key, determines the overtones, the other frequencies, which harmonize with a given key. To detect a frequency and give it a name is simply an assignment process. Nothing else need be done with it in terms of a relation to other notes. It is an isolated, albeit highly specialized, detection skill. Let us assume you can detect the frequencies to a precision of 1 Hz. Then no need arises for note names. You could answer questions about pitch with the physical unit, the frequency. Assume you hear a sound that swings with 1043 Hz, and then another that swings with 1041 Hz. If you can differentiate these two sounds, played for you an hour apart, then, well, congratulations, that's very good. A person with absolute pitch might answer that it sounds like a C6. Even so, the exact frequency in the equal-tempered tuning system for C6 is 1046.5 Hz. So, assigning a frequency to a note name is not exact, but good enough for most situations. Ear training to the scent is very helpful for relative pitch too. Let's assume a flute plays the lead melody, which you are accompanying with your guitar. Let's say it's a very hot day. The flute is tuned for normal room temperature. The increase of air speed with the temperature causes the flute to produce higher frequencies. The length expansion caused by the high temperature compensates for that effect a bit. But not enough. Therefore, the flute deviates from the perfect equal-tempered tuning to slightly higher frequencies. That is, the flute will be a few cents sharp. A temperature increase of 5, 10, or 20 degrees corresponds to 14, 29, or 57 cents. The high temperature alters all notes of the flute, so it still sounds harmonically for itself. If your ear is trained to hear small differences, and you recognize such subtle relative pitch differences, you would tune your guitar to the frequencies of the lead flute. In this way, your guitar or instrument would harmonize well. It makes little sense to keep two perfect equal-tempered frequencies. It is more important to harmonize with the flute than to isolate the instrument tuned perfectly using equal temperament. Of course, if there is no extreme situation, it will sound okay. But if it's in perfect harmony, it will sound awesome. Let's return to our ear training. Sooner or later, you will discover that your ear can retain the 5 notes in the example exercise until the next day, or even longer after some training, by concentrating on the recognition process, rather than simply guessing. If you are successful with these 5 notes, then you can say that you are a step nearer to acquiring absolute pitch, albeit with an inaccuracy of 1,200 cents. In other words, you can recognize the notes C2, C3, C4, C5 and C6, if they are played in tune. Now, you can start adding other notes, and slowly improve your absolute pitch ability. Remember, the ultimate goal is not absolute pitch. Best is to use ear training to improve relative pitch. However, to set the goal to acquire absolute pitch helps you to track the progress of your listening skills. Even as the program allows you to train in acquiring absolute pitch, most of the time you will train to improve relative pitch. To do absolute pitch training can be labor-intensive, as you have to take breaks of about 15 minutes in order to clear your ear of known pitches, perhaps doing some non-music related activity. Otherwise, after a few successful notes, you will most likely be using your relative pitch. On the other hand, as explained above, you really want to improve your relative pitch. So, you are invited to be impatient in pursuing that goal. Absolute pitch may become less important for you to acquire once you fully realize the advantages of relative pitch. If you train on a daily basis with the singing funnel method, which forces you to conceptualize the notes with your inner ear, you may acquire absolute pitch without specifically pursuing it. Not a surprising outcome, given that your skill in differentiating pitches becomes more and more precise. Consequently, you become more secure that a particular note lies within the tolerance required to be assigned a particular name. And bam, bingo! You can name the note with confidence. As a musician, you should train your ear in order to attain precision, distinguishing between subtle frequency differences. Hence, the program allows you to train up to a precision of 7 cents. A fact, absolute pitch is acquired most quickly in childhood, when we first listen to language and begin to utter sounds. Thus, a close relationship lies between speaking and listening. Or more specifically, the child learns to control the vocal cords by listening. The singing funnel method also does this. It brings you back to a similar environment for learning. That's why this method for improving your listening skills is more effective than any note-guessing game. One more tip if you strive for absolute pitch. Use scale degree numbers for learning scales and doing warm-ups. Scale degree numbers represent the function of a note better than solfege syllables. Use the fixed O system for ear training, as it helps associate specific sounds to unvarying note names. Have fun with the program, Listening Ear Trainer. and find out how well and accurately you can remember the notes.